Just want to call out, there are a couple of people who reach out to me on Slack in terms of that, okay, hey, we need access to AWS engine, event engine, the kind of lab which AWS host. Apologies, I think I had a discussion with the organizer and we were not able to get that done. But no worries. I mean, this recording or this session, I'm capturing that out. So you can try to replicate it once you have an account in place. And again, if you face an error, I'm part of Slack channel, the same Slack where you guys are there. You can reach out to me, we can interact and we can have the discussion. So don't worry, just in case if you're not able to do it, just carefully watch out how I'm doing it. And if you have any questions, please post it in the chat or unmute yourself and do raise it. But please clearly understand all the concepts, what we are doing on the console, okay? And yeah, last thing, the lab, all the code snippet, right from IAM policies to any HTML file, what I will be using for this lab, all of those things have zipped and packaged into the same GitHub repository where I have stored all my presentation from previous session. So if you can go to that repo, you will see a particular lab folder. Within that lab folder, I've already structured that out, okay? Now, today, first demo, what we will be starting will be very simple to how to create an S3 bucket, right? There are many people who are very new to the cloud, right? So for them, I can switch over to the new beautiful console of AWS, or I can stay. I mean, that's fine. I'll stay in this one. So this is how the AWS console look like for the people who are working for the first time, or this is your first any cloud session, any cloud journey, what you participate, right? So this is the AWS console look like. The wonderful thing about AWS console has been like the way the service have been categorized, right? I mean, even if you don't know which category falls or what are different high level category, from this console itself, you can look forward, right? So there are different kinds of categories high level you can see. And again, we have covered the same thing in our first chapter when we're talking about the overview of cloud. Like there is something compute, there is containers, there are even like a blockchain or a quantum computing. You can talk about management governance. There is good amount of, I would say, different categories of services, right? From like all different perspectives. Like approximately, it has been mentioned that there are 200 plus different AWS services which are provided, right? Now with that, what we'll today is we are going to focus is on first S3. So there are two ways. Either you can search S3 in the search bar if you don't know about it, where exactly that S3 will be, or you can go into the storage section and from there also you can access the S3. Anyways, fine, whatever you're comfortable with, right? So once you're into the S3, this is something, it looks like the S3 console. Each service, so the previous screen which we looked into it, that's more, you can say, like a landing screen, okay? This screen is more called as a specific console. So now if you go to S3, this will be called as S3 console. If you go to EC2, that will be called as EC2 console, right? The specific UI designed for that particular service, which almost from a theme perspective, you will see almost similar. Again, the UI might change based on the type of service, okay? So here we are there in S3. I've created dozens of other buckets for other purpose. Today, what we'll do is, let's say for the first time, if you come up on S3 console, so how it's going to look like, it will be like a blank screen. If I talk about, let me see if I can pull that up. No, I don't think I can do that. 1 second. Let me see. No, yeah, it is by default pointing me to this bucket only because I do have the buckets, right? But otherwise you will see like a welcome screen. And from there will be an icon like this, create a bucket, right? If you don't have any bucket, and this is coming from very scratch. But since I have a bucket, I'm directly pointed to the list of the buckets. In order to create a bucket, right? I think I understand you guys have done a pretty good homework, as I mentioned in the last session also, about what is bucket, what is object. If still you haven't done it, after the session, I'll post the playlist, all the sessions, all the previous session, 5 sessions we had, and this is 6th. All the 5 previous sessions have been uploaded to YouTube on AWS User-group Bangladesh channel, user-group channel, right? So you can reach out to me offline on Slack channel, so we can share the playlist or post the session. I'll put on the chat. So if this is something new and you're joining for the first time, please go through, before going this lab recording, which will be there by next week, please go through all the previous session where you will understand complete detail. So now I'll click on the create bucket. As we understood in the first session also, the bucket needs to be globally unique, right? So if I, let's say, put something like this, or anything, which is a very common name, it automatically will give me that bucket already exists, right? So let me try to give it, let me try to recreate that scenario of global unique. So I've given the bucket name. As I mentioned in the first slide also of S3, the bucket name should be globally unique, but bucket is already defined on a regional level. So you can see the region also here, which provides all the different regions, right? You can think of like all the United States, you can see of Asia Pacific, of Canada, Europe. You can see the different kinds of S3 bucket here. Then you can also provide the S3 object per ownership. We can skip this thing. This is as simple as like defining the permissions, like what kind of permission you need to give the bucket and all. This is very important. If you enable this particular service, that means the data stored within your bucket can be accessed by anyone across the globe, right? So do ensure if you have any sorts of very sensitive data, when I say sensitive, things like your credit card, any sorts of password, any sorts of health information, any sorts of financial information, you block all the public access. That means by default, you need to, this bucket will be private. Whatever policies applied, skipping those policies also, this bucket will be on the private. But if you uncheck this and apply a policy, then based on the policy which is applied on bucket, the bucket governance or the bucket permission will get changed. So do remember, this is a very important setting. I'll keep this as is, and then versioning, we'll also see how, we have already learned through versioning, like it's a way to redundant or data, or you can also think more of backup in case if something goes wrong. In detail, we'll also see a lab. I think I've also covered up a lab in the Amazon S3 section also, but we'll cover the lab again. And I see there's a question here. Please explain block all public access meaning. There are 5 kinds of it. Okay, so basically if you go here, right, as I was saying, block public access setting means it will once with a single click, it's going to block all different kinds of public access. So as you mentioned, right, there are not 5, there are 4 different kinds of public there, right? Public access through read, through write, or different kinds of policies and everything, right? So 4 high level kinds of public access which can be provided to bucket. In one single click, you disable all of them. So this way your bucket will be by default private. It won't be public. All right. Again, if you need to, like, there will be one lab which we will unmark this option, right, where you will see that we give a specific permission with help of policy bucket on it. But this is a one single way, one single click where you disable all different sorts of public access. Okay. I hope that answers your question in terms of the block all public access. Versioning, we have already understood that versioning in the previous session. Encryption, you can enable the by default encryption with S3 provides, right? So encryption, also we saw that there are 2 types, S3 and KMS. S3 is the default one, which Amazon takes care of everything, right? From applying the algorithm to managing the encryption keys or to even decrypt it. Everything is taken care by AWS itself. In case of KMS, there are different options or features available. But for demo purpose, we won't enable the thing and we'll go ahead and create the bucket. As I expected, bucket with the same name already exists, right? This is an error which we got. So as I already said, that bucket name should be unique across the globe. So let me try to see how we can make this as a unique. Hopefully this bucket should be unique now. I actually, I think there's a question from Tanveer. I actually asked what is the difference of 4. So as I said, right, so basically, let me get back to your question. So now, if you go and imply the bucket, you will see the bucket should get create of the unique. And I think there is a question here, right? So when it comes to, I think your question, what is the difference, right? So difference, as you can see, there is all different kinds of difference you can see here, right? One second. So here they have mentioned that S3 will block access permission applied to new added object. So what this, all 4 are different kinds of permissions have been given right from new access list, right? Like in terms of, as they are mentioned, right? S3 will block public access permission applied to newly added buckets or objects and prevent the creation of new public access ACL for the existing bucket and object. So any kinds of permission where we talk about, right? The permission can be to the new objects or bucket or any kinds of stuff, right? ACL that it's going to do, right? This setting does not change any existing permission that allow public access to S3 resource. So that's one perspective, right? That any new bucket, any new thing which is there, it will disable the access. But if you have explicitly given a permission to a public access, that it won't block it. S3 ignore all ACL that grants public access to bucket and object. S3 will block new bucket access point that grants public access to a bucket and object. This setting doesn't change existing policy that allow public access to it. And at the last, S3 will ignore public and cross-account access for bucket or access, which policy that grants public access to bucket and object. So I think as you were talking about, right? I think there's again the question from Tanvir was around that what's the difference? This difference are not actually any sorts of block public access difference. These are disabling the different form, the different way where you can have provided the public access to the buckets in the past, which may be in terms of bucket policy, which may be in terms of by explicitly manually making it public, in terms of by giving the cross account. Those all different sorts of permissions you have done. This 4-way, it's going to disable all the block access around that, right? So again, it's not that they are like 4 different offerings. So if you're getting confused, they are not 4 different offerings. They are the 4, I mean, they covers the 4 different way which people have given the public access via like cross account and other stuff. It disables all those 4 different high level ways. Okay. So now we'll go ahead, and I think there would be one more. We'll go ahead and create bucket. Hopefully this should get created. The bucket should get created this time. Okay, finally. So we were able to get the bucket right with this name, static website -Sanchit. Okay. So if you go here, by default, you can see the details. It is created in AP South, Mumbai. The bucket and objects are not public. It is created on the given timestamp. Okay. What we'll do is this is the bucket. Now, technically, this bucket is like looks like very simple way of doing it. As we also mentioned right last time, bucket, you can think more like your entire, your drive, right? Your drive, your directory. That's what you can think of logically. And now you can upload any data which you want. Now data can be anything, right? From any TXT file to a PDF to a JPEG. It can be anything. So let's say I go and let me upload or any of, let's say, so I'm uploading a CSV data file, which is of 4.7 MB. So this is how you upload a file. It's showing about the destination. Again, you can also give the permission on the stuff, right? On the object level, another thing. You can also specify the storage class. So we also understood in the S3 section, there are different kinds of storage class are there, right? To make, I mean, without affecting your performance and the type of requirement, how we can save more cost. Those are the different storage class, which we saw. And again, there are different ways you can change the storage class once the object is there. So all those things we have already covered in detail in S3 section. You can look into it. For now, we will keep this option as standard. We won't provide any sorts of S3 encryption. And again, as we cover, metadata can only be provided when you're uploading the object. I can't change the metadata once the object is already S3. So if I don't apply the metadata, I have to upload the object again and then provide the metadata. I will not be able to edit it without re-uploading that object. But since we don't need it, I'll click on upload. And if you close here, you can see the file is already there, right? So this is as simple of first experiment we can think of, like how to create a bucket and how to upload an object, right? With all the permission. Now, an important question can also come up is, okay, now you have an object in your bucket, right? I want to understand what kind of object this is. What is the data, right? Now, since I am the owner of this file, since I have uploaded this file from my local computer to S3, so it is very easy for me to understand. But let's say if you are very new, any of your friend or any of your colleague has uploaded the file and you want to understand what exactly the data is, you'll think there's only one option. It's very simple. Since you have uploaded the data, you can download it too. For sure, you can download the data, but AWS also provide an efficient way of understanding the data, which is called as S3 select. right? So what you can do is object action, and here you can do two things. Either you can generate a pre-sign URL. Okay, pre-sign URL means, let's say, even if I don't give any sorts of public access, like since I've given everything as a private, but still I want to download the data, right? And such a way that I don't want to give the access to a particular person, then how I can do it? Like I want to give a temporary access to the person without really giving the permission to download any data from the bucket anytime, right? So then you can do pre-sign. We'll also do an example of pre-sign. But for now, let's say query with S3. So here it's like a very simple SQL editor that you don't have to download the file and you can directly query it, right? So you can see this can be applied on any of these three formats. If your file is in CSV, JSON, or Parquet, and in CSV also, these are the three delimitations format. You can easily view the data with running a very simple query. Again, there are multiple different kinds of SQL statements you can add from template, like the select kinds of stuff, right? From select, where you can do more that kind of conditional based select query. But you can, since you want to understand the data, you can simply do it, format it, and you can easily understand what kind of data it is. So this is called as S3 select. So you can upload the CSV data without really downloading it. In a fraction of a second, you can read the data via just writing how you write a single SQL query. Okay. So that's the second thing, which is around the S3 select. Now, if we go back, and as I said, around the pre-sign URL, right? If I take this link and if I, let's say, go to incognito window and place this, what I got, access denied, because the object is not public. But if I now, let's say, go to the object option, share with the pre-sign URL, and let's say I make it for 15 minutes. So copy, okay. And now if I go back to my window, so this is my authenticated pre-sign URL, and I can able to download the data without making the bucket public. And this URL will only be applied or only will be applicable up to 15 minutes, right? So what we'll do is I'm just pasting the link here. If you see the time at my end, it's 7:24. So what we'll do is we will come back and we will see when exactly the file gets, the file which is there, how it get downloaded, right? I think 1 second. 1 minute. Let me share my screen completely. Okay. So yeah, I think I just noticed that there was some small glitch. So yeah, as I said, right? So when I upload this particular static website link, it didn't give me anything, right? Even though it is, I've generated the pre-sign URL, but it's giving me the denied because my bucket and the object is private. But when I do the same pre-sign URL, I'm able to download the file, and the window of expiry I've given the 15 minutes. So what we will do is after 15 minutes, we'll get back to this demo again and we'll see the URL, right? Till that time, let this window be here and we'll try to hit this pre-sign URL and you will see an error message rather than file getting downloaded, right? So we'll come back somewhere around 7:45, 7:40, 7:45, and we'll try to access again. But this is a quick demo around how to create the bucket, how to upload the object, play around with pre-sign URL and everything, right? Next, what we will do is we will try to enable the versioning. Okay. I think this demonstration I've already done in the past, but I'll repeat it for everyone again about the versioning. So quickly recap about the version. A versioning will help to take up the backup of the data. So just in case if incidentally your data get deleted or data get lost, you can again retrieve that data with help of version. Versioning is just like you do a backup within the same bucket. As well as you can also trace back to the old version and understand what is the difference of the data also. So it's not just meant for backup or replica, right? One more copy of it, but you can also compare the previous copy and other stuff. So what we'll do is for enable, what we'll do, we'll edit the bucket and we will enable it. One thing you can notice here is once you enable, by default, the bucket is not enabled here, right? So bucket is bucket is by default, you can see here is the bucket is disabled because I haven't, or I have never enabled versioning on this particular bucket. There might be a scenario. Once I enable the versioning on that bucket, I cannot disable the versioning. I can always suspend the versioning. Do remember that. That's a very important point to remember. Once you enable the bucket versioning on a bucket, you never can disable it. You can only suspend it. Okay. So what we'll do is by default, it's currently in a suspend mode because it's disabled. I will enable it. And as you can see, after enabling bucket versioning, you might need to update your lifecycle rule to manage previous version of object. We also cover this point that for the S3 cost, you will be charged for each and every different version of object. So let's say if you have one object and 10 different version of same object, totally you will be charged or you have to pay for 11 objects, not one object. So do remember that versioning needs to be done with proper life cycle. It's never been there, but it's a best practice that you put all your old version of data with the help of life cycle. Either you delete it, expire it, or put it into Glacier or in some other storage which cost you less if it is at all required. So we'll do enable it. And after enable also, the important point to understand it, it will only be applied after you enable it, it will be only to applied on the new object. So let's say before there was already a kind of a data.csv, which was there with me, right? So the versioning will not apply to this particular object by default. It will be applied now. If I upload any object, you will do it, right? So I'll show you the difference there. So here you can see the version ID as null. That simply means that versioning is not applicable to this particular object, right? But now if I upload any new data, let's say I add a file, we go to S3, okay. Let's say let me take this HTML file. Okay, so I upload the object. If I go back, you can see the version ID. Version ID means this HTML has a version. This has been tagged with a specific version, whereas data.csv is not version. So even if I delete this particular CSV, it will be deleted one set for all. Whereas if I delete this particular file, it will have a still capability. It won't be deleted permanently. It will have a delete marker and I can still recreate it. Okay. What I will do now, I will take this file and I will upload the CSV file again. Let's say, for example, if I go to this particular stuff, Athena dataset data.csv, and I upload it. Okay, we close this and we go to the version. As you can see, this data set, even though this is created from this, there is a version ID attached to the newer one, not the older one. And this versioning ID is for the same file name. I think this question was asked last time also. This will be only applicable for the same file name. Now, if I change the file name, make it data2.csv, it won't be applied. It won't be a new version for the same object. It will be a complete different object that will be created. So do remember that. Okay. Now, if I disable the version, so again, as I said, it's not disable. I acknowledge it. Save. And if you go back, so now it is not disable. If I go back again to properties and see, it is suspended. Previously it is disabled. Now it is suspended. Suspended is simple like a pause state, right? So how I can do it? If I go here and upload the file again, right? You can see the by default, the latest version of this file, which was uploaded just now, is null, right? That means this no version is applied. The versioning has been successfully disabled. And then you can delete this file, which will easily get deleted here, right? So this about versioning. Versioning is very important, whatever you do. Even if you do a cross-region replication, like let's say backing up this data across different region, or same region in terms of disaster recovery and all, versioning is mandatory. You will need to enable the version on both the buckets. Then only you will able to apply the replication. Okay. With that, what we'll cover up like bucket, object, resign URL, S3 select, and the versioning demo. Now, one important thing which is very good to understand is how to host a static website on S3 bucket. Okay. So what I'll do is I have a different bucket which I've created. Mine static hosting. I can use the same bucket also, this one, but I'll need this bucket for other demo also of CI/CD. So I'll use this particular bucket. In order to do static hosting website, there are broadly couple of steps it needs to be done. Okay. First step is upload the HTML file. Okay, the HTML file which is required. So I go to the lab, go to the S3 static website, and what I'll do is okay, I've uploaded this 3 HTML files. So data is there in file. Step 2, I need to enable the static hosting. For that, you have to go under properties of the bucket, edit, enable. Okay. Once you enable, there are 2 options of hosting that will come up. Either you want to use as redirect or website. Since we are storing a simple HTML file, I'll select as a website. Then you can provide the file name. For me, the file name is index.html. You can also provide the error document. So we have error.html. And then you can save the change. So now what you have done, you have uploaded your data, you have enabled it. There are 2 more options you have to do on top of this, is to provide the right permission to the bucket. In order to enable the static hosting, under the permission, you have to edit and unblock all the public access. Websites are meant for public access, so you have to unblock it. Again, you all do always remember, the bucket which you use for static website hosting should not have any other sensitive data, because you are unblocking all the public access for that. Okay, step 3 done. Step 4, you have to provide a bucket policy. Bucket policy, now I've disabled the block public access. That doesn't mean that by default people can host the website, right? That simply means that I have the permission now to provide the bucket policy. So I have to provide the bucket policy. The bucket policy is again given in the same lab folder, right? If you go and open this in the same lab folder, you will see the bucket permissions and everything have been given. So I will copy this particular JSON file, edit this, replace it, paste. Do ensure after you copy the JSON file, the policy from the GitHub, you need to provide the, okay. So here, this is a JSON policy in form, which is called as bucket policy, where you're giving is S3 get. Anyone can get the object, right? Generally, this is the way you control the access on your bucket. Do ensure that you give always a list privilege access, which we have learned in the IM in the last session itself. So I will give a get object on a specific bucket. So as I said, now that means that any object which is stored in this bucket will have the public access for read only. So do ensure when you enable static hosting for any website, don't store any sensitive data with it. Now I save it, and as soon as I save it, I just mentioned change the label as red. That means it's publicly accessible. As a next step, what I will do is I will go to properties and I'll fetch the URL. So my URL is this, right? And this is a fixed format. You will see that this is the way you can represent your URL, right? The S3 bucket URL, where you have the bucket name http your bucket name .s3 website your region, which region this bucket is in, right? So these 2 things will change: your bucket name and your region. So I've copied this particular stuff. Can everyone please go on mute? Okay, thank you. So now I'll paste this and I will do. So by default, you can see an HTML file. And if you see, there's a simple one. Again, this is not just for this window. Even if I go back here in incognito and I paste the URL, you will see this HTML website is working. This is as simple as that. Now I'll show you one trick, okay? Most of the people, when it comes to static website, what are the problem they do make is, okay? So previously, most of the time people make this common mistake. They upload the code, they provide the right bucket policy, enable the static website, but forget to disable the block public access. This is a very widely common problem which all the people face, right? And I think there was a question also asked by Tanveer at the beginning. So this is a demo. I'll also show how exactly block access. As soon as I enable block access, you will see this red icon of public accessibility just went off, right? That means even though I've given a permission, there is a permission of making this bucket as public, this permission has been overwritten by this particular functionality, right? Since I've enabled this, this permission also is of no use. And if I now go back and refresh this website, since it is cached, it will take some time. But if I refresh this website on incognito, immediately you will see 403 forbidden error. Whenever you see 403 forbidden error in case of static website, only and only issue is either you have forgot to disable block public access, or the bucket policy which you have defined is wrong, is not as per the requirement, right? I think this should, yeah. As you can see, this was got cached from browser, but by default, you're getting this thing. And again, once I enable this issue, I mean, I disable this particular block, save, confirm, which will make this public. And if I refresh this, okay, let me refresh incognito, and you can see it's working. So that's about static website and how powerful is the block public access. Any kind of policy, any kind of cross account which you give, if you don't remember it, someone else in the past, like you have just joined the organization, someone in the past has given it, now you want to block everything, right? Be very cautious, because this is going to break all kinds of integration, but this is a very powerful way of blocking all the public access. So that's about how you can also host a static website. I will let this stay as it is, because we'll also do one more demo around it. So we'll see in that time, right? Now, we have done this particular demonstration about how this particular, all the things work. What we'll do next is, we will go and play around with CI/CD, right? Let me check the time. So it's 7:40. Let's wait for 5 more minutes, and then I'll show the pre-sign URL also. Before that, I will go to the CI/CD demo. So I think in the DevOps section, DevOps thing, what we have done in the last session, I walk you through around 3 things. Code commit, code build, and code pipeline, code deploy, right? Those kinds of DevOps stuff where someone even asked that, okay, what I need to do if I want to be a DevOps engineer and all, right? So I will show you how exactly the DevOps pipeline works in reality, right? So in order to do that, what we will do here is we'll go to the AWS console. And under AWS console, first step is I will create a repo in code commit. Code commit is simple, like how you have a GitLab or Git repository. I want to give you a very, a demonstration from very start. So I'll first create a code repository itself. This is very simple. So I've given a name, static website demo. So via this pipeline, we will update the static website. So this website which I have host here, I will update that website, okay? So this is my static website is repo. And this is as simple. You get all the prerequisites and everything. How you work on any GitHub repository. with those git command, git clone, and those kinds of stuff. Same is the same way you have to do it, like how you provide your SSH keys and everything. The same is the way you have to operate. I will not focus, as you can see here also, right? You must use a git client, git version. So that simply mentions it is the same way how your GitHub will work. Now I won't actually go and download and do all those stuff. We will directly use the console and look forward. So here there is a functionality. Either I can create a file or I can upload a file. So what I'll do is I will add file, click on upload file. And this, one second, let me rename this file. Because again, just ensure that this thing will only work if you have the same file name, right? Let's see. So as you can see, this is like a simple HTML file with a red color, right? What I'll do is I'll upload a file now, index.html here. We will change the name. Okay. And commit. So this is a file which I've got stored in this particular repository. Okay. So this becomes my GitHub. Next, what I will do is I will go to GitLab or GitHub pipeline. This is my pipeline called as code pipeline, which is an AWS service. You can, people think of like a release pipeline, an orchestration pipeline to connect your source, your build, your deploy, right? This is one single pipeline. So what we'll do, we'll go ahead, click static website. You name the pipeline, you provide the role of it, and then by default, the role will be created. I'll click on next. Here you provide a different, you can do different kind of thing. You can use code commit, Amazon ECR, S3, Bitbucket, GitHub, and even enterprise, right? So GitLab is not supported, but you can do any of these things. What we will do is, since we have used code commit, I'll select code commit. And by default, you will see a pop-up that comes up is, give me the repo name, give me the branch. And now the important thing is, in CI/CD, it's always important that either you can have an automatic way to trigger the pipeline. What means is, this is the first time I'm setting up the pipeline. So it's going to manually be invoked. But let's say if you want to automate the pipeline, that whenever someone makes a change in the code commit and the pipeline should automatically invoke, then you need to use something called as CloudWatch event. As you can see, right? CloudWatch event to automatically start my pipeline whenever a change occurs. Now that change can be anywhere. The change can be in one single file. You update a file, you add a new file, any sorts of change, this will get triggered. And you can also see the output format, right? The output can be code pipeline default, or you can have a kind of a full clone kind of a thing. It's always important that you use the code pipeline default one, and we'll click on the next. Now, the option here is you can do a build provider. Build is, let's say if you want to package your code, right? Zip your code, or you want to do any of the testing and all those things, you can use the build option. Again, build is not mandatory, it's an optional one. In our scenario, in our demonstration, we won't need a build. So what we can do is we'll skip build stage, right? And we'll go to the deploy. Now you can see under deploy, there are many other options available. S3, ECS, service catalog, code, multiple options are available. What we will do here is select S3. Under S3, by default, you can select any region. Since the pipeline region is Mumbai, you have to select the bucket of Mumbai. What I will do is, this is my bucket, and extract before download. This functionality is very important. So by default, the code pipeline output will be zipped. So you have to tell code deploy that you unzip it and then you deploy. And if you have any specific path, like the prefix folder, if you within that folder, like let's say website/index.html or any sorts of specific folder you have within the bucket prefix, and within that prefix, if you want to put the file, that also you can do it, which is optional. I'll click on next. So this is how it is, right? Choose pipeline setting, add a source, build stage, we skipped it, add deploy stage, and I'll click on create pipeline. Again, I mean, going in a very demo tone, but if you have any questions, please post on the chat, right? I will happy to answer them. And as soon as the pipeline is deployed successfully, you can see a successful notification at the top in the green banner, and the pipeline is executed. Now, what I'll do is before the pipeline hits, like the pipeline is going to hit, let me go and get the URL. So as you can see, the pipeline is completed successfully, and immediately when you load, you see the red color hello world banner, right? Which was a very simple HTML before. Now, this was the first time when I did it, okay? So I have to invoke the manually. As I said, now what I have done when I deploy my pipeline, I've enabled the automatic push. So let's say if I make now a small change of blue. Okay, and commit. By the way, you should add description and all. That's a best practice. I'm just from demonstration, I'm skipping those things. But you should always put description, a proper name, and a proper email address. And now if I go back to the pipeline, in fraction of a second, you will see without me invoking it, it automatically got triggered and it is in progress. Now, if we go here, it's already finished successfully just now. And again, it was so fast because it's a very small thing. But again, what we have used, we have not used the full clone. Even if you see kind of stuff, when we are configuring the pipeline, we have not used a full clone. And if I go and refresh my page, it's of blue color in a fraction of a second. So this is how the power of the release pipeline or CI/CD works, right? This is a very small demo, so you will understand, okay, hey, why he's playing with different colors, right? This is very simple. But just think of when you're building a very large scale application where you have like around 30, 40 different services plugged together and you want to release it. This is how this kinds of structured pipeline help you to deploy and automate the deployment with a single click. You really don't have to go play around here and there, wire it, apply your memory around. No, I have to enable this configuration. No, I have to enable that configuration. Everything gets simplified with help of automation and DevOps. Automation, what we have learned is this release pipeline, like the CI/CD pipeline, what we called as, with help of AWS native services like code commit, which is like a GitHub repository, code build, code pipeline, and code deploy. Now we will also see that, okay, if this was a very simple example, but if I want to do like a automation of infrastructure, right? Like I want to really launch an EC2 instance via an automation fashion, then how I can do it. So what I'll do is, I hope this demo was good for you guys to understand. I will go to the AWS console, and here you can see, you can type here, or since I've already visited here, you can select AWS Cloud Formation. So this is the same same thing what we have covered in the last session itself, session number 5. Cloud Formation is an infrastructure as a code. As you can see here, it is mentioned, Cloud Formation provides a common language to describe and provision all the infrastructure resources in your environment in a safe and repeatable way. There's a more important thing which personally I do love about Cloud Formation is repeatable, right? It makes the things more repeatable and reuse, that you can design it once and you can reuse across different regions and different account. That's the beauty of the Cloud Formation, okay? So as a form of the Cloud Formation, and again, if someone is very new, what is Cloud Formation, how it works, I would request, please go back in the last session and then understand what exactly it is. And if you have any questions, please post in the Slack channel. I will happy to answer them after the session, okay? What we'll do is, this is like a welcome screen. So as I mentioned the S3 also, right? Since I've deployed S3 bucket, I was not getting that welcome screen, but generally you get this kind of welcome screen. Whenever you deploy any services for the first time, right? You get such kinds of welcome screen. Now, for the people who will be deploying, or it will be a brand new account, you will see such kinds of welcome screen for all the services. Now, what I'll do is, I'll click on Create Stack. Here in the Create Stack, you will see there is an options available where either you can use template, which I have designed, custom design. I can use a sample template from this given list. which is provided by AWS, or I can design the template with the UI UX, right? I'll show you what I mean. For now, we will upload a template, the one which I have custom designed. Again, don't worry, all this code snippet are already there in the GitHub repository. So any demonstration, you can refer to the code repo and you will get that, the GitHub repository. So I've uploaded the cloud formation. As I mentioned when I was explaining the cloud formation, I did mention by default, even if you upload, by default, cloud formation always launch via S3, pointing at S3. Now, either you specify, you upload the template in S3 bucket and give that location, or if you're giving it locally, cloud formation will upload on behalf of you. This is how cloud formation has done it. I have uploaded locally from my machine, but cloud formation uploaded to a default template with a unique name. So even if I repeat this template again with the same name next time, you will see this unique identifier would have changed. Okay, so now you can also, let me see. Yeah. You can also open or load this template in case of the designer. So this is how, if I zoom out a bit. Okay, so this is how you can design the template. So let's say if you're very new, you want to use cloud formation, but you don't understand what is JSON, what is YAML, you can automatically use this kinds of UI. On the left hand side, you can see different services. There are multiple of different services are there, and each service has a different kinds of features or functionality you can enable, right? You can just have to simply drag here and provide the configuration, connect it, right? And then you can provide the configuration. And again, you need to ensure that this dependency will only connect if there is any sorts of thing. I mean, since it is giving red because this is wrong. But again, if you are logically right, based on this will work and you can provide any sorts of settings here. Okay. So this about, you can design the entire your cloud formation in this way, like how this has been designed. You can similarly design it out in simple that way. I'll close this because that will override my template. But this is how the entire designer UI works. How you design anything, the same thing. This example also will help you to understand that. We'll go to the next. Demo stack. I'm just giving any name. You can give it. This name need not to be globally unique. This name needs to be unique within your account, within your region, not even account, within your region, my bad. And then I've given the parameters here. This can be different environment, dev, test, prod. This is a way to fetch the latest AMI ID of Amazon Linux. Click next. You can give the tag, right? Any sorts of tag you want to give, permission. This is a very important failure option, right? So as I mentioned in the cloud formation again, whenever the cloud formation fails, you can, by default, cloud formation always roll back, right? So it's going to be like a 0 or 1 state, like a binary state. If it deploys, it will deploy successfully all the resources. If it fails, it will fail all the resources, right? What that means is, let's say, for an example, there are 3 resources which you're launching: S3, Lambda, EC2 instance. S3 and Lambda got deployed successfully. EC2 instance failed due to some reason. In that case, when EC2 instance failed, cloud formation will also delete S3 and Lambda, which got deployed as a part of that particular stack. So either it will deploy all the 3 resources, and if something got failed, then it will delete all the 3 resources. So that is called as rollback. Rollback is a stage in which cloud formation itself delete all the resources which got deployed successfully on some failure. And again, you can do more settings, like you can receive the regular updates where the cloud formation, which resources got complete, another thing. Those are advanced settings. We will keep those options as is. We'll click on next. And what we'll do is capability. This is a very important thing. Since cloud formation is launching and I am on behalf of you, you are acknowledging it, that cloud formation do have the permission from your end to go and deploy an IAM resource. So this will take around 2 minutes. In meantime, let me understand how exactly or what is the template overall doing, right? That is more important to understand about that. So in case of cloud formation, as you can see here, So cloud formation, this is this all section, those 9 objects we have covered in the last session, but this metadata quickly to cover describes about your parameter. This is a parameter to make your templates dynamic in terms of you can reuse this across the region. Mapping is just like an option, like how you have an option A, option B, option C. That's kinds of option it's giving different environment wise. And resources is the only mandatory section of the cloud formation. In the about template, in this particular template, I can skip all the different sections, but resources is the mandatory section. And under resources, you can see these different resources. These are all different resources, right? Like the IAM role, the instance profile, the instance. These are, as well as the security group and elastic IP. These are all the resources. Okay. If anything goes wrong in one of the resources, all the previous launched resources will get deleted, as we understood. And here the important thing which to notice is cloud formation is not only a mean of launching or provisioning the resources. It is also very important to understand that it is also help you to bootstrap or install, right? Most of the time what happens is when you do a cloud, when you launch any of the resources, it's a bare platform. Like if I talk about EC2, after you launch an EC2 instance, you will either try to set up or install like Python, AWS CLI, or you will try to do any other stuff. Maybe let's say clone a GitHub repository in it, or you run a particular script. You can automate all those stuff with the user data section. In this particular, this is called as bootstrapping. In this entire user data section, you can define anything. You can even execute your Java jar file or even your Python code within this user data section. And cloud formation will ensure that this user data section get completed successfully, and then your EC2 instance come up. Okay, so those kinds of mature things also cloud formation can do outside just provisioning the resources. So if you go back in the event, by now it will be almost there. I think it will take a couple of more minutes because it's currently launching EC2, and after EC2 it's going to deploy elastic IP, and it will give us an URL to go and hit around it. In meantime, what we'll do is, if you check the time, it's almost 8, right? So that pre-sign URL which we were having, right? This pre-sign URL we gave the 15 minutes. So now if I refresh it, you can see it by default gave me access denied. The request has expired. So this is, if you remember, this pre-sign URL I had from my S3 section where I've generated with 15 minutes without, I just moved away from that demo without me doing anything. By default, AWS after a given window of 15 minutes expired the URL. So this way it ensures that if you have any object which is secure and you want to give only temporary access, you can give it without making the bucket public. So that was the example which I want to demonstrate with SIMs after this pre-sign URL. Okay. I can close this particular tab and let's wait for a few minutes. I think, yeah. So as you can see, this particular template is done. Now, this cloud formation template, as we understood, it launched multiple of resources, IAM role, IAM policy, security group, elastic IP, and EC2 instance. And not only just a provisional the EC2 instance, but it also set up Nginx, right? It also set up HTTP LAMP stack and also executed a PHP code in it, right? Deployed a PHP code, not executed, deployed a PHP code. What I will do next is, let me give you a quick walkthrough about this console. This is the same review page what we saw, right? If you need some information about stack, you can get it from here. If you want to understand the event and which and how cloud formation executed different resources in what sequence, then you can get it from different event. Under this event, you can easily see how exactly the cloud formation launched. Again, the sequence in which cloud formation launched the resources depends on the dependency graph. So what happens when I upload it and when I requested cloud formation to execute my template, it does a process of compilation. Exactly, it's not the compilation, but it behind the scene, it analyzes the template and creates a dependency graph of that template. Dependencies means, let's say if I go here in my EC2 section, I'm launching an Elastic IP, I'm launching a security group, IAM policy and IAM role. Now, each of these 4 or 5 resources will be required by EC2 instance, right? So that's why you will see by default, EC2 instance was launched at the last, like on the last second, right? And all the previous things, whether you talk about the IAM role, whether you talk about security, instance profile, everything got deployed before the EC2 instance. So that kind of dependency graph CloudFormation creates internally, irrespective how and which sequence you define it, right? It doesn't matter. Now, if you define first in under resource section, even though if you first define EC2 instance, that doesn't mean that it will execute in that section. It will execute in form of a dependency graph. If there is no dependency across the resources, then it will go in the sequence you have mentioned in the resource section. Do remember that. That's a very important point. And from the resource section, you can identify all the different 4 or 5, I mean, total 5 resources. It got deployed, maybe IAM role, Elastic IP or anything. What we'll do is next is I'll go and hit this URL. As you can see, by default, I neither have logged in into EC2 instance, nor have done anything. It by default went and executed the PHP script. I mean, set up the PHP script, and this is output what we are getting. Instance ID and the availability zone. So this how it's a very powerful service, and you can think of this particular demo with the demo or with the CI/CD, right? So now if you see the CI/CD demonstration, what we have done, that was one of the automation for the entire release pipeline. CloudFormation is more from an infrastructure automation perspective. When you blend this, both the capabilities, right, or both of this automation strategy, any complex, whether it's a entire data platform you talk about, enterprise data platform, or any machine learning, any sorts of application you can easily automate, you can deploy with all sorts of best practices, right? And in a very simple, documented way. So that's the power of adopting right DevOps maturity with CI/CD and the CloudFormation. I'll delete this tag. And when I delete this tag also, right, you will see it will delete the resources in a reverse order it was created. So first, at the last, if you see when create complete, the last resource which got deployed was Elastic IP. And when it is deleting, the first resources which got deleted is Elastic IP. So the way CloudFormation launched the resources, it's a reverse of it the way when it deploys it. So it is a stack data structure, last in, first out, or first in, last out. So that's about CloudFormation, right? So we have understood that a couple of demos about S3, which is required from cloud practitioner perspective. Similarly, we also understand the CI/CD. We understood around how exactly the cloud formation works, right, from an infrastructure code. Now, the last demo for today would be around Lambda, AWS Lambda. So what I'll do is, again, I'll go to the Lambda. If I go back and quickly give a recap, Lambda is a serverless service which is required, right, for any short stateless application. Any application which can run within 15 minutes of time frame, Lambda can be explored for it. But again, you need to understand out very detailedly when you are using Lambda. It can be even not, even your application takes 15 minutes, but it's not always the right case that Lambda would work. So what we'll do is, this is the console of Lambda. We'll click on create function. Here, what I'll do is I'll select author from scratch, right? Again, the same thing. You can either use blueprint, the existing given by Lambda, AWS itself, or the community one, the way community guys are defined, you can use that. You can also use the container image, right? If you have any sorts of Docker image, a simple Docker image which you want to run, you can run that also in Lambda. We will use the starter one, right? The custom, and I will give okay. Runtime wise, I will select Python 3.7. I need to give the permission. Either I can create the new permissions, or I can use the existing one, or I can also define the policy, right? What I will do here is I will use the existing one. And again, if you don't have existing one, there's a new repo, don't worry. I've already given the cloud formation. If you go in the lab section of Lambda, I've already given a cloud formation to deploy the IAM policy for you. Okay, so don't worry about it if you're very new. And now I assume that you know how to deploy the cloud formation. So this is as simple as a Lambda function is created. Very simple click, like almost like 2 to 3 clicks, your Lambda is there. Next, what I will do is I will go under the configuration. Under the configuration general information, I will change the timeout. Timeout is when your Lambda should be, I mean, how long your Lambda should run. I will make it 1 minute. Okay. And under code, if I go back, and if now this is my Lambda, like this is as simple as my Lambda function. I can under this to do section, I can write any lines of code, like 30 lines, 40 lines of any code in Python. And whenever, as we understood in the Lambda section, right? I think it was 3rd or 4th section where we understood like the server event-driven programming. Whenever the Lambda gets invoked, it will run this code snippet within this handler function and it will execute it. So now what I'll do is just for demo purpose, we will configure an event. I'll keep this just name, give a name, keep this as it is, create and deploy. Deploy means I'm saving this function and I will test it. You can see quickly within millisecond, this function got executed and I get a Lambda from a hello world. Again, do remember the charges of Lambda is on the millisecond level. So even though if I'm using 1.52 milliseconds, it charges me for 2 milliseconds for the duration. And the important thing is the memory. So if you remember, while I was demonstrating this Lambda at the beginning, I mentioned it is very important that you rightly use the Lambda. So let's say if you have an application, that application needs 12 minutes, but it needs like 3 or 4 GB of memory, then you do ensure that Lambda, you need to really go back, revisit your application, because Lambda may not be the right fit. If you constantly invoking that Lambda, the cost will be higher than you leverage an EC2 or an ECS. So it's very important that what you have to understand the nature and the type of your application. But if your application is running, let's say only 3 times a day or 4 times a day, then even though if it's taking like say 2 or 3 GB and it takes 15 minutes, still it is preferable that you go with Lambda. So what kind of application it is, what kind of requirement of the application, those analysis is very important before you pick up any of the AWS services, not just Lambda. So this is how we understood, right? Very simple example. What I will do is next, just to demonstrate, we will go and make this code a bit more one. So what I'm doing in this Lambda function is very simple. I'm taking an JSON as an input. That JSON will have number 1, number 2, and I'm doing an arithmetic operation, right? So I'll take this and I will paste it here. Okay. And I'll deploy. Now, next, what I'll do is I will change. 1 second. I'll configure my event. Now, again, the event itself also I've given in the, this is a JSON event. I've given this JSON event in the GitHub itself. So you don't have to worry a lot about it. You just have to clone that GitHub repository and you'll get everything what's required there. So yeah, and I will save this. The same thing. Now I'll close this and I test. You will see that the output, I mean, it's a test name. The response is null and I'm getting a response output. This is an input which I gave, and this is my output, which is all the arithmetic operation which I have done. The number 1, number 2, which is an input I gave, sum, product, differential, quotation, that is an output which I've got from it, right? So this is how you can do and build a very simple, quick Lambda. The Lambda function will remain the same, like how I have changed the code snippet here, like very simple code snippet. You can change that code snippet, however, what kind of application you want, as simple as reading a file from S3 to reading a message from SQS to anything. Now we will also understand a couple of more integrations with Lambda in terms of SQS and S3, but all kinds of stuff you can do. Even you can also, as I mentioned, you can also have a machine learning inference. If it is a lightweight machine learning model, you can store that also in Lambda. So this is the code. What I will do next is I will deploy a SQS. So one second, before I go to the SQS, I have to create an SQS. I will go here and I will search for SQS. The welcome screen, I'll go create an SQS demo. You can keep all those parameters same as is. Don't need to change anything for this particular demonstration. Just you need a queue. And within that queue, after the queue is done, you need to plug this queue with SQS, right? You need to integrate. So when the idea is whenever there is a new message that comes up in SQS, this particular stuff will come up. Very important error which I have got, right? Queue visibility timeout is 30 seconds and is less than the function timeout. Now what this means is a message in queue will expire in 30 seconds where the Lambda expiry is 60 seconds, right? So either how I can solve this? This is a very common issue. How I can solve it? Either I can increase the expiry of message in queue to 60 seconds, or I have to decrease the timeout of Lambda function to 30 seconds. I'll do the, I think since I've already configured everything, what I will do here, I'll make this as 0 and I'll make this as 30 seconds, which is easy for here to do. And again, just let's not make any changes. You properly analyze it. If your Lambda does need 60 seconds, then the only option is you have to go and change the expiry of your message. And I will save, I will try to save. As you can see, it's saved, it's taking, it's creating. And if let's wait for a few minutes. Once it's available, then we'll go to the Lambda and we will see that Lambda integration should be in progress. Let me refresh this. The SQS is already there, detailed. And if I go and refresh again, yeah, it's enabled. So this was a very simple way you can integrate. I mean, either you have an existing queue that you can integrate with Lambda, or you can newly create a SQS and you can integrate with Lambda. Now, what I will show you, I'll show one simple demonstration how to work with queue. We also learned about CloudWatch in the last thing, right? How CloudWatch can help in monitoring or logging. So if you see, this is the way it logs all the response, right? It's very helpful. I mean, in the previous two examples, you really didn't notice or you didn't require CloudWatch because the response was already getting printed in the, I mean, it was already printing on the console. But in this SQS demonstration, the response will not get printed on the console because you're not manually invoking the Lambda. You're really generating an event, and that event is invoking a Lambda. So the only way you can see, either you capture that response and put it in some database, or you can get it from the CloudWatch. So one second. Okay. So what I'll do is I will send and receive the message. So this is my event JSON, which was the same one, right? Which we have given as in Lambda, and I'll click on send message. If you can go back here, the message available means how many messages are currently available, which can be processed. Message in flight means the message which someone is already processing in progress. You can see the count of both is 0. Either there are two options of it. The message went in the queue, and it got processed, or message got dropped. Most probably message will never get dropped. That's a policy of SQS. It will get processed at least once. So there's the only option left, which the message got processed. And yes, the message got processed. And if you see the response here, right, based on the timing, this is how you can see from the CloudWatch log itself. Now, someone can ask me, how are you confident that this only got processed with the SQS message? So what I will do is, let me make this as text. And here, if you see the event source is AWS:SQS. That means message from SQS invoke a Lambda, as in form of an event, and Lambda process that, right? Now we can make any changes, right? If I want to, let's say, change my message payload. So instead of 20 and 30, let's say, sorry, 10 and 20, I mean to, let's say, make 30 and 50 and send the message. Okay. Now, if I go back again, and if we hit refresh and open, so you can see here, this also message which was 30 and 50 got processed. It was in the same logs because it was within the same time span. Timestamp, it was the same. It also got processed, and you can see the output here. So this is how you can also invoke, very simple way. You can invoke a kind of a Lambda with help of an SQS. This you can also extend to S3 bucket, and otherwise you can do it, right? You can also extend to S3 bucket and you can take care of it. So that's about Lambda, how we can easily invoke. I mean, you can develop a Lambda, integrate with SQS, SNS. There are multiple ways. If you go back here in a trigger perspective, there are multiple ways: API gateway, IoT, Alexa. Like there are multiple such integrations available from AWS services as well as the partner event source like Atlassian, Auth0, ClearTap, Datadog. There are multiple such other options also available, which you can invoke with help of, I mean, you can consider as an event source for the Lambda. So that's what we have from today's session. If I quickly recap, we started with understanding S3 bucket, how you can define the bucket, how you can name it, what are the bucket policy, how to upload the object, right? Then we understand how we can use S3 select around it. You can block public access, define, I mean, do versioning, then static website hosting, CI/CD, cloud formation. At the last, we've wrapped up while deploying and understanding how to deploy Lambda and connect Lambda with SQS or any other services. So that's what we had from today's demo session. This demo sessions is very important to start. I mean, this is, I would say, level 100, which is called the beginner. In AWS ecosystem, there are 4 levels: level 100, level 200, 300, and 400. Level 100 is the beginner. So this all demo are level 100 demos, which will help you to start your cloud journey. And when you expand, you can see there are multiple other options you can do, right? Like, for example, you can have SNS with Lambda. You can have cloud formation, very complex one. You can follow those kinds of additional stuff. But from a cloud practitioner perspective, first of all, you don't even need demonstration, like demos and all. But this is the best one, which will help you outside the different sessions what we have covered up. So that's all what I have from today's session. I'll take a pause. If you have any questions, please post in the chat or let me know. I'll be happy to answer that out. So I can see a message. I use a lifecycle for deleting. Again, I use a lifecycle for deleting older than 3 version object. I want to delete any object which is older than 3 version more than 1 day, but I'm not successfully using a lifecycle policy. I'm not successfully using a lifecycle policy. Again, as I said, lifecycle policy is more for outside this particular course. But again, coming to the point about lifecycle policy, you need to look into it. Versioning, if you, as I said, right, when you enable versioning with lifecycle, you need to ensure that you properly look into that perspective, right? Delete versioning will not, I mean, when it comes to expire, it will expire your object, not delete it. So you need to understand how exactly you have configured it when you're giving the lifecycle policy and that front. And again, the expiry is it when you talk about the lifecycle expiry, it's not very instantaneously that, okay, now you apply and it will be done. It will take like at least few hours and then it will remove it. So it's not very real time. It's more like in a batch mode. It will take on its time and do it. And again, there would be for sure some configuration issue which you would have done. Because of that, you would have received that error when it comes to when you have applied the lifecycle policy and it didn't got deleted. Any other questions do we have here from today's demo or from the past session? Please post on the chat. So next question is, what is create change set in cloud formation? Okay, first of all, I think you need to really understand the cloud formation in detail. And when it comes to create change set, so cloud formation is just like any other programming language, right? Uh, and whenever you work in any programming language, you cannot write all of your program code in one go. What you will do, you'll start writing like a building block, like a Lego brick kind of thing, right? You'll write step 1, then again you test it, step 2, again test it, right? Create change set is like that kind of a stuff. Like as cloud formation also, you need to write test, you need to write test, right? So change set help you around that perspective, that you can do all those kinds of changes, and you can create different sets of that changes, and you can test another thing. Again, I would highly request, if you are focusing on cloud practitioner, you should focus on the core fundamental. Change set is not required in terms of the cloud practitioner perspective. Again, it's very important. If you want to be looking as a DevOps in your career, then create change set. Even the lifecycle hook, I mean the hook which cloud formation has just come up like last week, those all things are very important. From a cloud practitioner perspective, it's not required. Any other questions? Yep. So I think we are good for today's session. Again, I would request everyone, please go through the playlist. We can share on this. I'll share it on the Slack after this session, as well as the GitHub repository for all the code snippet. Please go through all the previous sessions and refresh, revise yourself. Next, revise all the sessions. Next week, we'll have the last session for this bootcamp. So if you have any questions, any queries about it, please come up with all the list of questions and queries. I'll be happy to answer them. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, we can post in the Slack channel. I'll be happy to respond as and when I go through those questions. So that's all I have from today's session. Thank you so much for joining this session, and have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.